In this week's Parshas Ekev, in Moshe Rabbeinu's recounting of the episode of the Egel HaZahav, he explains how at the conclusion of the 40 days following the granting of the Aseret HaDibros, Kadosh Baruch Hu turned to him and he said, "Go down and see what your people have done. They've created a molten image for themselves." And Kadosh Baruch Hu wanted to begin all over again, to erase their existence and to begin with Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu explains how he was carrying the Luchos HaBris and he came down the mountain itself, and when he saw what had occurred, va'espos b'shnei haluchos, he says, I grabbed on to the two luchos, va'ashlichem, and I cast them off. I threw them al shtei yadai from my hands, va'shabareim la'inechem, and I broke them before your eyes. And comes along the Archaim HaKadosh and he asks the obvious question, maybe it's not so obvious unless you're really medactic in the lashon of the words in the pasuk. He says, what do you mean that Moshe Rabbeinu said that I grabbed on to the two luchos? He was carrying them in his hands already. Why did he have to grab them? And suggests to Archaim HaKadosh that maybe he really wasn't carrying them. For after all, if you look at the pasuk previously, it says, Ushnei luchos, when he came down, Ushnei luchos habris al shtei yadoi. Moshe doesn't say on the tablets, and the Shnei Luchos HaBris were biyadoi, in my hands, or bishtei yadoi, in my two hands. Rather it says, al shtei yadoi, on my two hands. And suggests to Archaim HaKadosh that maybe he wasn't really holding them at all, but rather, hayu haluchos gavahos ayad Moshe. They were just above his hands, namely, lemala miyadav, above his hands, v'hayu nosas atzman. And much like we say that the Aron was no say esatzmo, that the ark that housed the Shnei Luchos HaBris ultimately given on Yom Kippurim were never really carried by the Levium, but it carried itself. So too the Aseret HaDibros, born by Moshe Rabbeinu, descending from Har Sinai, were not really being carried by him, but they were hovering just above his hands. But when Moshe Rabbeinu saw the Jews having fashioned the golden calf, Husar Koach Kedushasam, the divine presence of the Shekhinah left the Aseret HaDibros, v'hutzrach letofsam b'yado, when he had to grab onto them. And I thought to myself, what is the Or HaChaim HaKadosh really telling us? And perhaps he's telling us as follows. Initially, the way our lives were meant to be lived with the Torah Kadosha being presented to us was that the Torah would be ever present, right in front of us, hovering right above our hands, only requiring that we step to the plate in order to engage in the mitzvah at hand, whether bein adam lamakom, between ourselves and our Kadosh Baruch Hu, or bein adam lachaveiro, or between ourselves and our fellow man. And it's so true that if we see the Torah opportunity right in front of us, it's so geschmack, it's so naturally delicious, it's so naturally self-satisfying to engage in the mitzvah that a Kadosh Baruch Hu wants us to do per his command. And it's so satisfying, and it's so sweet, and so enervating and energizing for us to engage in the mitzvahs ben adam l'chaveiro by helping out our fellow man, our neighbor, our friend, our chavrissa. But what happens in life is, at times, we permit the Torah hovering right in front of us to kind of remain there, or remain at a distance, I should add. And when we follow molten images, and when we create molten images, and when we use the brachos that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has bestowed upon us, all the gold that the Jews were blessed with, to trade it in and to make something of an idol, as it were, permitting it to take our allegiances and to take our time and to take our concentration and our focus, well, then truth be told, then the only way that we're ever going to succeed at engaging in mitzvos that tether us to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, or tether us to each other, is by grabbing onto them. Va'etvos b'shnei haluchos, grabbing onto them, not letting the opportunity get away, not letting the moment at hand slip through my fingers. If I have an opportunity to do a mitzvah, if I have an opportunity to watch a shir, to listen to a shir, if I have an opportunity to do a chesed for another, then I have to grab onto it. And only if we grab onto it will we feel its splendor, and will we feel its sweetness, and will we feel its enrichment. I don't know about you, but I haven't had an aliyah 5 months plus. And Baruch Hashem, I've been to Minyan since Erev Shavuos. And I don't even begin to know. For people who do not daven every morning, do not recite the Yom, I don't know how people even know what day it is during the week. We're just turning the calendar in time. And we're kind of floating in the air. And it's so hard to grab onto the moments and to recognize what we can yet achieve even during these trying times. I haven't kissed a Sefer Torah. I haven't even approached a Sefer Torah in close proximity at Minyan because I've been maintaining what we've been instructed to do, namely to maintain and establish proper social distance. But if we have anything to learn from the Sedra, is that we have to look at our lives and grab onto the moments that we could turn into realities of Torah experience, and by doing so, to feel elevated at hand, closer to Ribbon Shalom, and closer to our fellow man. Have a wonderful Shabbos.